Poor single mom, texted the Millionaire CEO by mistake asking for money. What he did next shocked her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The rain pattered against the grimy windows of the small apartment where Sarah Williams sat hunched over her cracked smartphone, her fingers trembling as she stared at the screen. She had been working double shifts at the diner, barely making ends meet. And now the rent notice looming on her kitchen counter made her chest tighten with anxiety. Her son's cough had kept her awake half the night, and her stomach growled from skipping breakfast to save a few dollars. With a deep breath, she typed a quick message to the wrong contact, thinking it was her old friend who might help. Hey, I really hate to ask, but I could use some help. Rent is due, and I don't know what else to do. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, the screen glowing in the dim light, her heart hammering in her chest. Outside, the city continued its usual bustle, yellow taxicabs splashing through puddles and streetlights flickering against the wet asphalt. But Sarah barely noticed, consumed by worry. Moments passed, and a notification appeared on her phone, the little bubble making her jump. It was a reply, and her breath caught as she read the words. I saw your message. I think I can help. Confusion and curiosity mixed in her eyes. She didn't know the sender was none other than Ethan Carter, a billionaire CEO known for his discretion and philanthropy, currently checking messages in a quiet corner of his penthouse office. Ethan had received countless messages every day, but something about this one, the desperation and sincerity, made him pause. Without revealing his identity, he decided to respond in a way that could test character and kindness, typing, "Tell me more about your situation. How can I help?" Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertainty and hope warring inside her. She explained her situation in brief, mentioning her son, her overdue rent, and the impossibility of covering all expenses. Ethan read each line carefully, noting the humanity behind every word, the struggle hidden in a life that most people overlooked. He could have ignored it, but something in her tone, raw and honest, compelled him to act. Across town, Sarah leaned back against the peeling paint of her apartment wall, rereading the message and wondering if this was a friend responding or some prank. She glanced at her worn shoes, the frayed hem of her jeans, and the faint stain on the kitchen counter, evidence of a day's exhaustion. Every detail made the moment feel real and immediate. The rain outside intensified, hitting the window pane with a staccato rhythm as if echoing her pounding heart. She typed a cautious reply, expressing gratitude and uncertainty. I don't know if this is even the right number, but thank you for reading. Ethan's eyes softened as he read the words, recognizing that honesty and humility often accompany true kindness. In that instant, an unspoken connection began to form, a bridge between two lives separated by wealth, circumstance, and the vast expanse of the city. The narrative had only just begun, and already the air seemed charged with possibility, as Sarah, unaware that the man on the other side was a millionaire CEO, felt the faint stirrings of hope, a fragile thread pulling her forward into a chain of events that would soon change both their lives forever. Sarah Williams sat on the edge of her worn sofa, the single lamp in the corner casting long shadows across the cramped living room. The apartment smelled faintly of stale coffee and laundry detergent, a testament to her long day working 2 shifts at the diner. Her son, little Tommy, had already curled up on the lumpy couch blanket, a small cough rattling his chest as he drifted into an uneasy sleep. Sarah's mind raced with numbers, rent due in 3 days, bills stacked high, and groceries nearly gone. The message she had sent to the wrong contact lingered in her thoughts, a fragile hope wrapped in anxiety. She had no idea that the person on the other side, Ethan Carter, was not an old friend or casual acquaintance, but a billionaire CEO who had decided, for reasons he could not fully explain, to observe her response and intentions before revealing himself. As she stared at the glowing screen, the city noises outside seemed distant, muffled by the walls and windows of her tiny apartment. The occasional honk of a taxi or the rumble of the subway below reminded her that life outside went on, indifferent to her struggles. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, the skyline of New York City stretching behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint tapping of his fingers against the desk. He read Sarah's reply over and over, noting the careful choice of words, the honesty and humility, the way she did not exaggerate or dramatize her situation, but simply stated it as it was. He found himself intrigued, not by her plea for money, but by her resilience and the subtle strength in her voice. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to meet someone like her in person. Someone who faced the world with courage and integrity despite the overwhelming odds stacked against her. Back in her apartment, Sarah glanced at the clock. Midnight. The city outside was still alive, but she was alone except for Tommy, sleeping fitfully. She wrapped a thin blanket tighter around her shoulders, feeling the chill in the room. She could not afford the heating bill to turn it up, and the thought made her stomach knot. Yet even in that moment of desperation, a strange flutter of hope lingered. She did not know it yet, but that flutter was a seed planted by the message from Ethan, who had promised to help. She felt compelled to respond, typing cautiously, explaining how small the overdue rent was in comparison to the mounting stress, how she tried to make ends meet by picking up extra shifts, how she tried to shield Tommy from worry, even as she worried herself. Ethan read each line, the subtle signs of determination and care shining through. He decided to take the next step carefully, framing his message in a way that would allow her to feel supported without humiliation, writing, "I think we can find a way to help you. I would like to understand more about your situation. Would you be willing to talk tomorrow?" Sarah read the message, her heart jumping, disbelief and cautious hope mixing in equal measure. Could this really be happening? She stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back a careful affirmative, her fingers trembling slightly, as if the act of sending it made the impossible seem real. That night, she did not sleep much. Her mind raced with possibilities, imagining what form this assistance might take, questioning the motives of the person on the other side. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared a plan, thinking strategically, yet personally. He was going to see whether her kindness and honesty extended beyond written words, whether she truly carried herself with integrity when faced with the offer of help. Little did they both know, this initial correspondence was the first step in a chain of events that would intertwine their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. The following morning, Sarah awoke before sunrise, the weak gray light of dawn slipping through the blinds. She prepared breakfast for Tommy, doing her best to mask the exhaustion and worry from the night before. The apartment was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant city sounds. She checked her phone again, seeing the message waiting from Ethan. The careful wording, the offer of a conversation, hinted at more than just a simple handout. She could feel her pulse quicken, the weight of anxiety momentarily replaced by a flicker of anticipation. As she held the phone, imagining the person on the other end, the narrative tension built, pulling her into a story larger than her current life. A story that promised change, hope, and an opportunity she had never dared to imagine. The city outside continued its relentless rhythm, unaware of the two lives, about to intersect in a way that would test character, inspire trust, and ultimately forge a connection based on empathy, integrity, and kindness. The following afternoon, Sarah Williams nervously prepared to leave her apartment for the small coffee shop where she had agreed to meet the mysterious helper who had offered to assist her. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening with puddles reflecting the early afternoon sunlight, and she tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear as she adjusted the strap of her worn backpack, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. Tommy waved from the doorway, a small, hopeful smile on his face, and she reassured him with a gentle nod before stepping out into the bustling city streets. As she walked, her thoughts raced, trying to imagine what this person might look like, how they would react to seeing a single mother struggling to survive, and whether they would judge her for the life she had been forced to live. At the same time, Ethan Carter was sitting in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, dressed casually to avoid drawing attention, his laptop closed in front of him as he watched the entrance with a careful eye. He had rehearsed what he would say, but part of him wanted to see the raw, unfiltered reaction of Sarah, to witness her authenticity in person, the same qualities that had drawn him in from the very first message. When she entered, the bell above the door jingled softly, and she froze for a brief second, noticing the well-polished interior, the aroma of roasted coffee beans filling the air, and the gentle hum of conversation around her. She clutched her purse tighter and scanned the tables, spotting a man who looked calm yet attentive, sitting alone with a slight smile, and she assumed this must be him. As she approached, her shoes squeaking lightly on the hardwood floor, Ethan stood and extended his hand with a friendly, non-threatening gesture, his voice warm as he said, "Sarah, I presume?" She nodded, a mixture of relief and nervousness flooding through her, and they both sat down, the small table between them suddenly feeling like the center of a world that had shifted in an instant. They began to talk cautiously, Sarah explaining her struggles with rent, bills, and raising Tommy alone, while Ethan listened intently, asking questions that revealed his genuine concern without patronizing her. Each answer Sarah gave was met with empathy, not pity, and she began to sense that he truly wanted to help, not because he owed her, but because he was intrigued by her honesty and resilience. Across the table, Ethan considered the best way to offer assistance, not just as a one-time act, but in a manner that could empower her and her son, providing stability and opening doors to opportunities she could never have imagined. He spoke carefully, presenting options such as part-time work with a local foundation he supported, guidance for financial planning, and even temporary housing arrangements, all framed as a collaboration rather than charity. Sarah absorbed each word, her heart beating faster as the enormity of the offer began to register, a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and cautious hope flooding through her. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes but blinked them away, wanting to remain composed, to show that she could rise to the occasion if given the chance. The conversation continued for hours, punctuated by small laughs, thoughtful pauses, and the gentle clinking of coffee cups, and in that time, a fragile trust began to form between them, built not on wealth or status, but on the recognition of courage, integrity, and kindness. As they finally stood to leave, Ethan handed her a card, simple yet elegant, with his contact information and a note that read, "We will work together to find solutions. You are not alone." Sarah held it in her hand, feeling the weight and promise of a future that seemed suddenly possible, the first tangible sign that her life might shift in ways she had not dared to imagine. Walking back into the streets with the sun breaking through clouds, glinting off the puddles, she felt a mixture of empowerment and anticipation, knowing that this encounter was only the beginning, that the path ahead would test her resilience, her choices, and ultimately, her capacity to trust again. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. Over the next few days, Sarah Williams found herself reflecting on the meeting with Ethan Carter repeatedly, the words he had spoken and the calm assurance in his eyes replaying in her mind as she managed the small routines of her daily life. She returned to the diner for her double shifts, her movements habitual yet infused with a quiet determination, carrying the sense that something significant had shifted in her world, even if only subtly. Each morning she walked Tommy to the small neighborhood school, clutching his hand, feeling a renewed sense of purpose as she thought about the possibilities that Ethan's offer represented, and she found herself quietly strategizing how to manage her time, her energy, and her responsibilities to make room for this unexpected opportunity. Meanwhile, Ethan observed her progress discreetly, keeping track of her responses to the plan they had outlined, noting the diligence, honesty, and resilience that defined her character, and he felt a growing sense of respect and admiration for the way she balanced humility with determination, a rare combination that few people in his social and professional circles possessed. Sarah began to engage with the foundation Ethan had suggested, initially with small tasks, organizing supplies, and helping with outreach programs, feeling awkward at first as she navigated spaces unfamiliar and staffed by people whose lives and experiences were far removed from her own. Yet gradually, she adapted, learning to translate her practical skills and compassionate approach into meaningful contributions that were noticed by those around her, and she started to experience the subtle joy of feeling capable and valued in a way that she had not felt in years. The afternoons were often spent in quiet reflection, reviewing schedules, planning for the next day, and jotting notes about her goals and responsibilities, her handwriting neat despite the long hours. A tangible record of her commitment to change and growth. Ethan continued to provide guidance, not in a domineering way, but with careful mentorship, offering suggestions and encouragement, allowing Sarah to make choices and take ownership of her actions, fostering a sense of autonomy that contrasted sharply with the helplessness she had felt just weeks earlier, when rent notices and overdue bills had loomed over her like an insurmountable wall. As they communicated through emails, messages, and occasional meetings in the small conference rooms at the foundation, a subtle rapport developed, grounded in trust and mutual respect, and while Ethan's true identity as a billionaire CEO remained known to him, he refrained from using it as leverage, wanting her actions to reflect her character rather than the influence of wealth. Sarah's confidence grew incrementally, and she began to see possibilities where previously there had been obstacles, envisioning a life where she could support Tommy, stabilize their housing situation, and even consider longer-term goals, a vision that felt increasingly attainable with each passing day. At home, she maintained the routines of caring for her son, managing the apartment, and balancing her shifts, but with a newfound lightness, a sense of hope and capability that had been absent for too long, and even in moments of fatigue or doubt, she would glance at the card Ethan had given her and feel reassured that someone had seen her potential and believed in her. Across the city, Ethan monitored developments from a distance, adjusting his approach as needed, providing subtle resources and guidance without overwhelming her, and he felt the satisfaction of seeing someone thrive based on their own merit, a rare and profound pleasure that went beyond business successes or social status. By the end of the week, Sarah had demonstrated both competence and integrity, completing tasks with precision and care, earning the quiet admiration of colleagues, and cultivating the beginnings of a professional network that could support her future aspirations. The connection between her and Ethan had grown into something grounded in respect and the shared understanding of challenges overcome, laying the foundation for trust, collaboration, and the eventual deepening of their relationship as they navigated the intersection of kindness, opportunity, and ambition together. One crisp Saturday morning, Sarah Williams awoke earlier than usual, the soft golden light of sunrise spilling into the small apartment and casting a warm glow over the worn furniture and stacks of papers she had been using to plan her week. She dressed quickly, checking on Tommy to ensure he had breakfast and was ready for school, his small backpack slung over one shoulder and a cautious smile on his face as he glanced at her, sensing the subtle change in her demeanor. She left the apartment with a renewed sense of purpose, the city streets quieter than usual as she navigated puddles and slick sidewalks, and she arrived at the foundation office where Ethan Carter had scheduled a special meeting to discuss the next steps of her involvement, a meeting that felt both daunting and exciting. As she entered the modest conference room, she saw Ethan waiting, casually dressed yet composed, a folder of notes and plans open in front of him. His posture was relaxed, his expression attentive, and Sarah could not help but notice the calm confidence that seemed to radiate from him without arrogance. They exchanged greetings, and then Ethan began to outline opportunities for Sarah to expand her contributions, suggesting new initiatives for community outreach, coordinating events to provide resources for families in need, and mentoring other volunteers, all framed in a way that allowed her to exercise creativity and leadership while still respecting her current responsibilities. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally pausing to reflect. The nervousness she had initially felt replaced by a quiet confidence that grew with every affirmation of her ideas and insights. She realized that for the first time in years, someone was not just offering her help, but was treating her as capable, intelligent, and worthy of responsibility. During the meeting, small moments of connection emerged, subtle gestures such as Ethan handing her a pen, pausing to listen intently, or offering a quiet word of encouragement when she hesitated, and each one deepened the sense of trust and respect between them, reinforcing the bond that had begun with a simple, mistaken text message. After the discussion concluded, Ethan suggested a brief walk outside to see the community garden adjacent to the foundation, a project Sarah had been involved in organizing. As they strolled, the crisp air carried the scent of freshly turned soil and blooming flowers, and the quiet hum of the city beyond created a serene backdrop. Ethan asked about her personal goals, her hopes for Tommy, and the challenges she faced. And Sarah found herself speaking candidly, sharing fears and aspirations she had rarely voiced aloud. Ethan responded with empathy, acknowledging the difficulties while highlighting her strengths and the potential he saw in her to create meaningful change. The conversation naturally turned to their initial encounter, the text message that had sparked this journey, and Sarah laughed softly, remembering the disbelief she had felt when someone she did not know had responded with interest and kindness rather than judgment. Ethan smiled, noting that it was precisely her honesty and integrity in that moment that had made him willing to step forward and offer support. By the time they returned to the office, the sky had shifted to a deeper shade of blue, the late morning sun catching on the edges of the surrounding buildings, and Sarah felt a profound sense of clarity and purpose, understanding that this relationship, grounded in mutual respect, trust, and the acknowledgement of her inherent worth, was something rare and transformative. As she prepared to leave for her next commitment, Ethan handed her a folder with additional resources and a note that simply read, "Continue to trust yourself, and know that your kindness has power." And Sarah clutched it to her chest, a tangible reminder of the unexpected journey that had begun with a single, accidental message, and she stepped back into the streets of New York, the city alive around her, feeling both humbled and emboldened, ready to embrace the opportunities ahead with courage, gratitude, and the quiet hope that this story was only beginning. Over the following week, Sarah Williams noticed subtle but profound changes in both her personal and professional life, as the support and guidance from Ethan Carter began to create tangible shifts in her circumstances. She arrived at the foundation each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, balancing her administrative tasks, organizing supplies for community programs, and coordinating volunteers with an efficiency and confidence that surprised even herself, her earlier self-doubt gradually replaced by a quiet pride in what she could accomplish. At home, she managed her routine with Tommy, preparing simple meals, ensuring homework was completed, and sharing small moments of laughter that had previously been rare, the weight of financial stress still present, but mitigated by the assurance that a safety net was beginning to form, thanks to Ethan's discreet but impactful assistance. Each evening, after the apartment was quiet and Tommy was asleep, Sarah reviewed the notes Ethan had provided, planning her schedule and jotting down ideas for improving the outreach programs, considering new ways to engage local families and coordinate resources, and reflecting on the remarkable journey that had begun with a single accidental text message. Ethan, meanwhile, observed her progress from a distance, monitoring the developments of the Foundation's programs and her contributions, careful not to overwhelm her, but ready to provide strategic advice when necessary, his appreciation growing for the resilience, intelligence, and compassion she demonstrated with every task she undertook. Their communication, both formal and informal, became a rhythm of encouragement and collaboration, punctuated by moments of personal exchange, small conversations that revealed the depth of character on both sides, and subtle acknowledgments of the trust forming between them, which grew steadily into a mutual respect that neither wealth nor circumstance could create on its own. One afternoon, Ethan invited Sarah to attend a local fundraising event to represent the foundation and engage with potential donors. The venue was a sunlit community center, bustling with families and volunteers, the walls adorned with colorful posters and photographs, highlighting past successes. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she stepped through the doors, acutely aware of the responsibility she bore, but also the opportunity to demonstrate her dedication and capability. Ethan stayed nearby, providing quiet support and guidance, his presence a reassuring anchor, and as the event progressed, Sarah's natural warmth, empathy, and ability to connect with people became evident, earning genuine smiles and expressions of appreciation from those around her. At one point, a donor approached, asking detailed questions about the program and her vision for its growth, and Sarah responded thoughtfully and confidently, explaining how small initiatives could scale and emphasizing the importance of empowering families and community members rather than simply providing aid. Ethan watched, impressed by the clarity, authenticity, and integrity of her responses. After the event concluded, they walked together to a nearby park, the crisp air carrying the scent of early spring blooms, and the city skyline stretching across the horizon as Sarah reflected on how far she had come, from the anxious, desperate moments of the mistaken text, to a woman capable of making a real difference. Ethan remarked on her growth, noting the courage, resourcefulness, and compassion she had demonstrated. And Sarah felt a quiet thrill, the realization settling in that this partnership was far more than transactional. It was a genuine connection based on mutual respect and shared purpose. As they parted for the day, Sarah felt a renewed sense of confidence and possibility, the journey ahead filled with potential not only for her own stability and success, but for the lasting impact she could have on the community she had come to care for deeply, all beginning from the simple act of reaching out in vulnerability and the unexpected kindness that had responded in return. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah Williams began to notice a growing unease that she could not easily shake. A quiet tension, rooted not in the work she was doing or the progress she was making, but in the shadow of the relationship forming between her and Ethan Carter. She found herself questioning whether she truly deserved the support, the opportunities, and the kindness that had been extended to her, and whether any connection that transcended the transactional could be genuine given the vast gulf in their circumstances. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, she returned to her small apartment, the familiar scent of laundry and the faint hum of the refrigerator greeting her, and she sank into the worn armchair with a sense of exhaustion tinged with doubt, Tommy asleep on the couch beside her, clutching his favorite blanket. Her mind replayed the interactions of the past weeks, the meetings, the guidance, the subtle encouragements, and with each memory came an insistent question. Was this support truly offered freely, or was there some expectation hidden beneath the surface, some obligation she could not yet see? Across town, Ethan sat in the quiet of his penthouse, reviewing the foundation reports and her updates, unaware of the internal struggle she was experiencing. He had no hidden agenda, only a desire to foster growth and reward the genuine integrity he had seen from the beginning. Yet he sensed that the disparity in their lives might create hesitation and self-doubt for Sarah, and he wished there were a way to communicate that his respect for her character was sincere and unconditional. The following morning, Sarah attended a planning session at the foundation, her notebook open and pens at the ready, yet she found her usual confidence tempered by the lingering self-questioning. She listened to volunteers and donors, contributing when she could, but inwardly wrestling with feelings of inadequacy and the nagging fear that she might be taken advantage of or judged if her mistakes were revealed. Ethan observed her discreetly from across the room, noting the tension in her posture, the slight hesitation in her speech, and the brief downward glances when her ideas were met with questions. He recognized the signs of someone struggling with internalized doubt, someone who had spent years surviving hardship and had learned to question their own worth, and he resolved to find a subtle way to reassure her without undermining her autonomy. After the session, he approached her quietly, his tone warm yet professional, acknowledging the excellent work she had done and emphasizing the trust and confidence he had in her abilities, carefully framing his words to reinforce her competence without creating dependence. Sarah listened, the knot in her chest loosening slightly, but the voice of self-doubt persisted, whispering that her successes were not enough, and that perhaps she had only been given these chances because of pity rather than merit. That night, as she prepared dinner for Tommy and herself, she contemplated the conversation, the guidance, and the opportunities, realizing that the fear she carried was not rooted in reality, but in a lifetime of circumstance that had taught her to question every kindness and assume the worst motives. The recognition sparked a shift within her, an awareness that she needed to confront these insecurities and allow herself to accept support and recognition without guilt or suspicion. Over the next few days, she began experimenting with this new mindset, accepting compliments on her work, engaging confidently with new volunteers, and allowing herself to appreciate the mentorship and resources Ethan was providing. Slowly, a sense of balance returned, and she began to see that the connection forming between them was not about obligation or power, but about mutual respect, shared goals, and the affirmation of her own abilities and integrity. In quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come from the initial panic of the mistaken text message to navigating complex responsibilities with composure and thoughtfulness, and she realized that the internal struggle she faced was part of a natural process of growth, trust, and emotional recalibration, preparing her to embrace the full potential of the opportunities before her. and the genuine human connection that had begun to take root between her and Ethan, a bond grounded not in wealth or status, but in authenticity, respect, and shared values. The turning point came on a crisp Friday afternoon when Ethan Carter invited Sarah Williams to visit his private office in the heart of the city, a space she had never imagined she would enter, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, and the polished floors reflected the sunlight streaming in, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. Sarah felt a flutter of nerves and anticipation as she walked through the lobby, the hum of elevators and soft murmur of well-dressed professionals, contrasting sharply with her own modest attire and the daily realities she had navigated for so long. Yet she held her head high, determined to meet this moment with the same authenticity that had guided her since the initial, mistaken text message. As she entered Ethan's office, he greeted her warmly, gesturing to a comfortable chair opposite his sleek, dark wood desk. And she took a seat, absorbing the subtle details, the artful arrangement of books, the understated elegance of the furniture, the faint scent of fresh coffee in the air, all of which spoke of a life vastly different from her own, yet not intimidating in the way she had feared. Ethan began by acknowledging her contributions to the foundation, highlighting the tangible impact of her work on the community programs and the families they served, and Sarah felt a swell of pride and gratitude, realizing that her efforts were seen, appreciated, and valued by someone whose judgment she deeply respected. Then, with a careful, thoughtful expression, Ethan leaned forward and presented a proposal, explaining that he wanted to create a permanent position within the foundation for Sarah, one that would allow her to lead projects, mentor volunteers, and expand outreach efforts, providing not only financial stability but also professional growth and recognition. He framed it as a partnership rather than charity, emphasizing that her integrity, dedication, and problem-solving skills had earned this opportunity, and that he trusted her to shape it according to her vision and values. Sarah's initial reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief, her mind racing to process the magnitude of the offer, the implications for Tommy, and the rare chance to step into a role where she could exercise autonomy, leadership, and creativity, all while making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Tears pricked at her eyes as she struggled to find the words, realizing that this moment represented not just financial security, but validation, respect, and the acknowledgement of her perseverance and character. Ethan, noticing her emotional response, offered a gentle smile and reassured her, saying that he believed in her abilities and that the foundation had been built for people like her, people who combined compassion with action, and that he hoped this role would allow her to flourish while continuing to serve the community with the same heart and honesty that had first caught his attention. Sarah finally took a deep breath, allowing herself to accept the offer, and as she did, she felt a profound sense of relief and empowerment, the weight of uncertainty and fear lifted by the recognition that her efforts, integrity, and resilience had created opportunities far beyond what she had imagined possible. In the following moments, they discussed logistics, potential projects, and strategies for community engagement. The conversation flowing naturally, punctuated by laughter, thoughtful nods, and the occasional pause to absorb the significance of their plans. Sarah left the office that afternoon with a tangible sense of possibility and momentum, her steps lighter, her heart fuller, and a renewed determination to embrace this chapter with courage and grace. The encounter marked a pivotal shift, a grand gesture by Ethan that went beyond simple assistance, transforming a relationship that began with a mistaken message into one grounded in trust, empowerment, and genuine connection, setting the stage for a bond that had the potential to deepen into both personal and professional fulfillment. And Sarah walked away with a sense of wonder and optimism, realizing that acts of kindness and integrity could indeed change lives, including her own, in ways she had never anticipated. Several months had passed since Sarah Williams first sent that mistaken text message, and the world she had once navigated with constant worry and uncertainty had transformed in ways she could scarcely have imagined. Her position at the foundation had expanded, giving her both financial stability and a sense of purpose, and she moved through each day with a quiet confidence that had replaced the apprehension and doubt that once dominated her life. Tommy thrived as well, attending school with a newfound joy and participating in local activities, often returning home to share stories of his day, his laughter filling the apartment that had once seemed so heavy and confining. Ethan Carter maintained a careful presence in her life, offering guidance when appropriate but allowing her autonomy, respecting the integrity and capability that had initially drawn him to her. Their interactions evolved naturally, filled with warmth, subtle humor, and moments of shared understanding, creating a bond that went beyond mentorship into genuine friendship and mutual admiration. One crisp evening, Ethan invited Sarah to a small gallery event celebrating the impact of the Foundation's recent projects. A gathering of community members, volunteers, and supporters, held in a sunlit loft space filled with vibrant artwork and photographs, highlighting the families and individuals whose lives had been touched. Sarah arrived, her nerves fluttering not with anxiety but with anticipation and pride, aware of how far she had come since the panic and vulnerability of her initial message. As the crowd mingled, Ethan guided her to a quiet corner, and in a moment of sincere openness, he spoke softly about how her courage, honesty, and dedication had inspired him, not only in the realm of philanthropy but in his personal understanding of trust, kindness, and connection. Sarah listened, her heart full, realizing that the relationship that had begun with a mistaken text had blossomed into something rare and profound, built on mutual respect, shared values, and the recognition of each other's strengths. Then, with a gentle but deliberate gesture, Ethan reached into his pocket and produced a small, elegantly wrapped box, presenting it to Sarah with a calm smile and words that caused her breath to catch. "This is for you, a symbol of the journey we have shared, and the trust, hope, and connection that have grown between us." With trembling hands, she opened the box to reveal a delicate bracelet, simple yet meaningful, engraved with a phrase that encapsulated the path they had walked together. "Kindness changes everything." Tears pricked her eyes, and she looked at him, gratitude and amazement mingling with the warmth that had steadily grown between them. Ethan spoke again, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want you to know that what began as a chance interaction, a mistaken message, has become something I value deeply. I would like to continue this journey together, not because of circumstances, but because of the person you are and the integrity you carry." Sarah, overwhelmed by the sincerity and thoughtfulness of his words, felt a mixture of disbelief, joy, and hope. She realized that the act of reaching out, the honesty in her plea, and the courage she had shown had created a bridge between two very different lives, one that could now support love, trust, and partnership. As the evening progressed, they shared quiet conversation, observing the smiles of children and families benefiting from the Foundation's programs, and Sarah understood that the gift and gesture were more than symbolic. They represented a commitment to stand together, to continue creating impact, and to honor the vulnerability and kindness that had first brought them together. Walking home later that night, hand in hand, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary arc of events. From a moment of desperation and a text sent by mistake to a life transformed through opportunity, guidance, and the recognition of her worth, culminating in a bond that was both personal and profound. She glanced at Ethan, gratitude and affection welling in her heart, knowing that their story was a testament to the power of honesty, integrity, and human kindness, and that the chance encounter that had sparked everything would forever remain a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage and truth can create ripples capable of changing lives forever.